Andre Whitaker, Dancehall Squash, was arrested by ICE in South Florida.
So, after months of rumors, court dates, and more drama than a reality show reunion, we finally know why Squash took that plea deal. And let us tell you, it's not looking good. Stay tuned, because we're breaking down the deal, the evidence, and what it means for his future. Backstory. If you've been following celebrity news lately, then you've probably heard the name Squash more than once. And no, I'm not talking about the vegetable you leave on your plate at Thanksgiving. I'm talking about the dancehall artist from Montego Bay who's been making headlines for music, yes, but lately, mostly for trouble with the law. Now, for anyone new here, let's rewind just a little bit so you're not completely lost when we start talking about plea deals, prosecutors, and courtroom drama. Squash, whose real name is Andre Whitaker, first came into the spotlight with his breakout hit tracks in the Jamaican dancehall scene. He had this raw energy, a kind of from the streets for the streets vibe, and fans loved it. His popularity exploded in the late 2000s, and it looked like he was on track to be one of the big names keeping dancehall alive internationally. But fame has this funny little habit. It shines a big old flashlight on everything you do, good or bad. And in Squash's case, that flashlight started catching some shadows real quick. Reports started surfacing about his alleged involvement with gangs, violent incidents, and things you don't want tied to your stage name if you're trying to sell concert tickets overseas. And here's the thing. Dancehall has a long history of artists who lived on the edge, walking that blurry line between art and the streets. Fans often say it gives the music its grit and authenticity, but that edge can cut both ways. Squash was no stranger to controversy. From clashes with rivals to rumors about his connections with organized crime, the stories followed him like a bad smell you can't air out. Then came the arrests. Authorities started zeroing in on him, saying he wasn't just brushing up against the wrong crowd. He was the wrong crowd. We're talking allegations of gang activity, weapons charges, and ties to violent crimes that were way past celebrity gossip level. This was now courtroom headline material. And look, artists getting into trouble isn't new. Every few months, some rapper, singer, or actor finds themselves in the spotlight for something other than their talent. But in Squash's case, it wasn't just one bad night out or one unlucky incident. His name kept showing up again and again in reports, like the chorus of a song you can't get out of your head. Fans were split. Some were like, this is just the system trying to bring down another successful artist. Others were side-eyeing him, saying, nah, where there's smoke, there's fire. And Squash didn't exactly calm things down. He kept his music coming, sometimes even doubling down with lyrics that sounded a little too close to the accusations swirling around him. By the time prosecutors were ready to lay down the law, Squash was already in deep. And that's how we ended up here, talking about a plea deal that could decide the rest of his career. But before we get to the ugly details of that deal, you need to understand what charges were on the table and why they had him boxed in with nowhere to run. The charges? Alright, so now that you've got the backstory, let's get into the charges. Because this isn't some, oops, I forgot to pay my parking ticket situation. No, the laundry list that Squash was staring down looked like it came straight out of a crime drama script. First up, illegal possession of firearms. Now, in some places you can get away with saying, that's my cousin's gun, officer. But in this case, prosecutors weren't buying any excuses. They claimed Squash was holding serious firepower, stuff you don't keep around unless you're preparing for more than just backyard barbecues. We're talking about weapons linked to organized crime, not your average household protection. Next, ammunition charges. And here's the kicker. When you're caught with both the guns and the bullets, the defense gets a whole lot harder. Think of it like getting caught with a fishing rod, bait, and a fish flopping in your bag while you're standing next to a no fishing sign. You can't really say, nah, I wasn't going to use it. Then came the big one, gang-related activities. Prosecutors weren't just accusing Squash of hanging out with the wrong people. They were painting him as part of the machine, an active member in a violent group, involved in everything from extortion to serious assaults. In Jamaica, this isn't taken lightly. Gang charges carry heavy penalties, and once they stick that label on you, it's hard to shake it off. And because this wouldn't be complete without a little extra mess, there were links to violent incidents floating around his name. Now, Squash wasn't directly charged with certain murders being investigated, but his name kept coming up in reports about conflicts between rival groups. Basically, prosecutors were saying, look, even if he didn't pull the trigger, he knows who did. That's not the kind of association you want stamped on your Wikipedia page. Altogether, these charges painted a picture that was, let's just say, less than flattering. Instead of up-and-coming dancehall superstar, the headlines were leaning closer to alleged crime boss with a mic. Not exactly the brand image you want when you're trying to book a European tour. Now, let's talk about the stakes, because each of these charges carried serious time. Illegal possession of firearms? That alone can get you years behind bars. Add in the ammunition and the gang activity, and you're looking at potentially decades if convicted. And we all know the legal system. When prosecutors stack charges, they're basically saying, we're gonna throw all this at you and see what sticks. Here's the funny, not ha-ha funny, but more like that's rough funny part. A lot of fans thought Squash might try to fight this out, pull the innocent until proven guilty card, and let his lawyers go head-to-head with the prosecutors. But the evidence? It wasn't looking good. From what insiders say, there were witnesses, there was physical evidence, and there was definitely a sense that the prosecution had enough to keep him sweating. So, to sum it up, Squash wasn't just facing one little charge he could beat with a clever lawyer and a good suit. He was staring down a wall of accusations that made the plea deal option start to look less like giving up and more like survival. But what exactly was in that plea deal? What did he agree to, and why did it shake his fans so badly? That's what we're getting into next. Why a plea deal was even on the table. So, you might be wondering, why didn't Squash just fight this in court? After all, a lot of celebrities take the not guilty route, drag things out, and hope their lawyers can poke enough holes in the case to get them off the hook. But here's the deal. Squash wasn't sitting pretty with options. The prosecution had built a case strong enough that even the best defense team would be sweating bullets. First thing you have to understand is how plea deals actually work. It's not like the movies where someone yells, "I'll take the deal," and suddenly they're walking free. A plea deal is basically the prosecution saying, listen, we've got you. You can either roll the dice with a trial and risk a long sentence, or you can take this deal, admit to something smaller, and we'll knock some years off. It's like ordering the value meal of justice. Still expensive, but not as bad as the deluxe combo you didn't want in the first place. Now, why was the plea deal even an option here? Well, prosecutors don't usually throw one out unless they feel like they've already won the game. They had multiple charges stacked against Squash, firearms, ammo, gang involvement. And on top of that, reports said they had witnesses willing to testify. If you've ever seen a courtroom case with witnesses flipping, you know that's usually when things go south real fast. People in Squash's circle were allegedly cooperating, and that's never good news if you're the one on trial. Another big reason? Trials are expensive and time-consuming. Prosecutors love to save the court's time and the taxpayers' money by locking in a conviction through a deal instead of dragging everything through months of hearings, witnesses, and appeals. In Squash's case, the evidence was so heavy that offering him a deal actually looked better than giving him the stage to fight it out and possibly complicate things. But here's where it gets interesting. A plea deal usually means the prosecution is offering something, but it also means they're demanding something. And from everything we've seen, Squash didn't get a sweetheart deal. He wasn't walking away with probation and a pat on the back. No, the plea deal was there because prosecutors wanted a guaranteed win, and Squash wanted to avoid the nightmare scenario of being buried under a decades-long sentence. Think about it like this. You're at a casino. You've been losing all night, the dealer has all the cards, and suddenly they say, hey, you can walk away right now with a little bit of money left in your pocket, or you can keep playing and probably go home broke. Most people would take the deal. That's where Squash was. On top of that, the court of public opinion wasn't leaning in his favor. The more details leaked, the harder it was to convince fans, or jurors, that he was completely innocent. And in a trial, perception can matter just as much as the evidence. A jury that's already side-eyeing you because of your reputation is not the kind of jury you want deciding your future. So, bottom line, the plea deal was on the table because Squash was cornered. The prosecution had the leverage, the witnesses, the evidence, and the pressure of public scrutiny all working against him. Taking the deal wasn't a bold move. It was the only move that gave him even a little bit of control over how bad things were going to get. Next, let's get into the nitty-gritty. What exactly was in that deal? Because once you hear the terms, you'll see why fans are saying this might be the beginning of the end for squash. What the plea deal actually says. Alright, so let's talk about what Squash actually agreed to in this plea deal. Because it's one thing to say, yeah, I took a deal, and another thing to lay out exactly what that means for your life. Spoiler alert, it's not good news. From what insiders and court reports have revealed, the plea deal cut down the most serious charges, but still left Squash with a hefty price to pay. The prosecutors essentially said, "We'll drop some of the scarier stuff if you admit to this particular set of crimes." So, the gang-related accusations? Those weren't the ones he formally pled guilty to. Instead, he accepted responsibility for illegal possession of firearms and ammunition. That might sound like a downgrade, but don't get it twisted. Those charges can still carry years behind bars. So, what does that mean in practice? It means Squash admitted that, yes, he had weapons and ammo he wasn't supposed to have. The gang involvement wasn't completely erased, though. Even if it wasn't the centerpiece of the deal, that shadow is still hanging over him, especially in the media. People aren't suddenly going to forget the gang allegations just because they weren't part of the final guilty plea. Now, let's look at the sentencing details. While exact numbers are still in play until the formal sentencing date, deals like this usually shave down decades into something more manageable. Instead of staring at 20+ years if convicted on all counts, Squash is probably looking at a sentence closer to 5 to 10 years, depending on how much credit the court wants to give him for cooperating. And yes, cooperating is one of those words that can get real messy in his world. Because when artists are seen as working with prosecutors, fans and associates don't exactly throw them a parade. On top of prison time, there's usually probation and fines tacked on. Translation: once he's out, Squash will still be under a microscope, with the court basically saying, "We're letting you breathe free air, but don't slip up or we'll put you right back in." That's not an easy way to live, especially for someone trying to restart a music career. Another important part of plea deals is what's called allocution, where the defendant has to stand in court and admit what they did, in their own words, for the record. Imagine being a dancehall artist whose image is built on toughness, then having to look a judge in the eye and say, "Yes, I had an illegal weapon, and yes, I broke the law." That alone can do serious damage to credibility. Fans want their heroes untouchable, not standing there confessing. And let's not forget international travel restrictions. With these charges on his record, Squash is going to have a hard time booking shows abroad. Countries like the US, Canada, and the UK don't exactly roll out the red carpet for people with firearms convictions. That means smaller tours, fewer international fans, and way less money coming in. So, to sum it all up, the plea deal trimmed the mountain down to a hill, but it's still a steep one to climb. Squash avoided the absolute worst-case scenario, but what he accepted is nothing to laugh at. Time behind bars, probation, fines, and a reputation hit that might follow him for the rest of his career. And here's the kicker: we're not even at the worst part yet. Because the question everyone keeps asking is, why did he take it? What made him decide that admitting guilt was better than rolling the dice in court? That's where things really get messy. The real reason he took it. Okay, now we've reached the part everybody's been waiting for. Why did Squash take this plea deal? Because, let's be real, when you've built your career on being untouchable, admitting guilt is like putting kryptonite on your own mic. So, why did he fold? The short answer? The evidence was stacked against him like a Jenga tower one move away from collapse. Let's start with the witness problem. Reports say that people close to Squash were willing to testify, and not just random neighbors who thought they heard something. These were insiders, folks from his circle who could point fingers and back up the prosecution's story. If you know anything about cases like this, you know that once people start flipping, the defense gets weaker by the second. Jurors love a first-hand story, and the prosecution had more than one ready to take the stand. That alone could have buried him. Then there's the physical evidence. We're not talking about hearsay or gossip. Authorities allegedly had actual firearms and ammo connected directly to him. When prosecutors walk into a courtroom holding your gun in a plastic bag, it's a lot harder to play the "that's not mine" card, especially when ballistics reports and serial numbers are in play. It wasn't going to be his word against theirs, it was going to be his word against cold, hard evidence. But here's where things get even worse: the gang connections. Even though those weren't part of the final plea, prosecutors were more than ready to lean into them if this had gone to trial. That means they could have brought in even more witnesses, more reports, and possibly tied him to violent incidents indirectly. The risk? If a jury even suspected he was involved in gang-related crimes, they might convict him on everything just out of fear. And let's be honest, nobody wants to sit on a jury thinking the guy on trial has dangerous friends waiting outside. And you know what else? Timing. Squash was already on shaky ground with the public. Social media was buzzing with rumors and speculation, and every leaked detail made him look worse. If this had gone to trial, it would have been a media circus. Headlines every day, fans dissecting every testimony, Twitter running wild with memes. It would have been impossible to control the narrative. By taking the plea, he cut off that slow drip of bad press before it turned into a flood. Now, let's talk about the what-if factor. If Squash had rolled the dice and lost at trial, he wasn't just looking at 5 or 10 years. He was looking at potentially decades in prison, 20+ years. Think about that. 20 years is enough to turn a hot new artist into, wait, who was that again, territory. By the time he got out, the industry would have moved on. That's not a risk you take when you still want a career. So the real reason Squash took the plea? It was survival. He saw the evidence, the witnesses, the risk of a decades-long sentence, and he made the call. Admit to the lesser charges, serve the time, and at least keep a shot at bouncing back someday. What's worse, 5 to 10 years with a comeback attempt, or 20 to life with your name fading out of playlists forever? It's ugly, it's bad, but it's the reality. And it explains why fans are torn between disappointment and understanding. Some think he sold out, others think he was smart. Either way, the decision wasn't about pride, it was about survival. Next up, let's look at how this deal is going to hit him where it hurts the most: his career. How this affects his career. Now, let's talk about the fallout. Because a plea deal doesn't just happen in a vacuum, it's not like Squash can serve his sentence quietly, then pop back on stage like nothing happened. This deal is going to leave marks on his career, and not the kind that boost your street cred. First off, let's hit the obvious: time away from music. Even if Squash only serves the lower end of the sentence, say 5 years, that's half a decade of missed opportunities. Music changes fast. Today's hitmaker is tomorrow's remember when. Just think about it. 5 years ago, TikTok was barely making noise, and now it's practically running the charts. By the time Squash gets out, the sound, the trends, the platforms, they'll all be different. That's like showing up to a party 5 hours late and expecting the DJ to still be playing your favorite song. Second, the reputation hit. In dancehall, a little controversy can sometimes add fuel to an artist's mystique. But this isn't just controversy, it's a conviction. Admitting guilt to firearms charges isn't the kind of thing you can spin into a PR boost. And let's be real, the plea deal makes him look less like a misunderstood artist and more like a guy who couldn't fight the case. Some fans will ride for him no matter what, but others, they'll move on. Attention spans are short, and loyalty fades faster than a cheap tattoo in the sun. Third, international touring. This one's huge. A firearms conviction on your record is basically a locked door to places like the US, Canada, and the UK, 3 of the most profitable markets for any dancehall artist. Forget big festivals and sold-out arenas. Forget rubbing elbows with global stars. Squash might be stuck playing smaller shows in countries willing to look the other way, and that means way less money. Artists don't survive on streams alone. Live shows are where the real paychecks are, and if your passport can't get you into the venues, you're in trouble. Let's not forget about business deals and sponsorships. No major brand is going to risk putting Squash's face on their campaign now. He's not selling sneakers, energy drinks, or cologne anytime soon. And collaborations? Other artists might think twice before featuring him, especially if they're trying to stay marketable. Music is full of collabs, but nobody wants to explain to their label why they're working with a guy tied to firearms charges. Here's another angle: the psychological toll. Prison isn't a writing retreat. It's not like he's going to come out with 200 new songs in a notebook, ready to record. Time inside can drain creativity, and the stress of dealing with probation, media scrutiny, and fan backlash doesn't exactly help the artistic process. Even if he does make new music, will fans still care by then? And here's the irony. Some people will still root for him, because the narrative of fallen star making a comeback always has an audience. But the road back won't be easy. He'll need to rebuild trust, reinvent his sound, and fight against the stigma of being the guy who admitted guilt. That's not a small hill to climb. That's Everest without a Sherpa. So, when you put it all together, the plea deal didn't just take away his freedom, it put his career on life support. The music industry doesn't wait, and fans don't either. Squash is about to learn that lesson the hard way. Next, we'll take a look at how fans and critics are already reacting to this whole mess. Spoiler, it's loud, messy, and not doing him any favors. Public reaction. Alright, let's talk about the mess after the mess. Because if the plea deal itself was a fire, the music industry's response was basically someone running into that fire with a gasoline can and a confused look on their face. The minute Squash's plea hit the wires, phones started ringing off the hook. Managers, promoters, label execs, they all suddenly became marathon runners sprinting away from any association. Publicly though, oh honey, it was crickets. Nobody wanted to be the first one to say, yeah, we saw this coming. Because if they admitted that, it meant they knew something before we did, and that's a whole new scandal. But let's be real, people did know. Behind the scenes, there were whispers louder than a Baptist church choir. Industry folks had been dodging Squash like he was a bad buffet shrimp for months. Tour deals went mysteriously on hold, collaborations were delayed due to scheduling conflicts, and suddenly everybody's calendar was busier than Beyoncé's during awards season. What's fascinating, and by fascinating I mean depressingly predictable, is how quickly the narrative shifted. Yesterday's brother in the struggle turned into today's we barely worked with him. Loyalty in this industry is thinner than the Wi-Fi signal at your grandma's house. Let's talk about artists too. Some spoke out, mostly the up-and-coming ones, who saw an opportunity to score points with fans by taking the moral high ground. They were like, we don't condone this behavior, we stand with the victims, blah blah blah. Don't get me wrong, those statements are important, but notice who didn't say a damn word. The big names, the ones who actually shared stages and studio time with Squash. Suddenly, everybody's gone mute. Someone checked their throats because that silence is suspicious. And then we get the PR gymnastics. His label, bless their stressed out hearts, tried to spin it like, we believe in rehabilitation and Squash deserves another chance. Translation, we've already poured millions into this man and need to salvage something before our shareholders start a mutiny. The problem is, fans don't buy that anymore. They've seen too many artists get canceled and then quietly resurface like a roach when the lights come back on. Oh, and let's not forget the bloggers, podcasters, and YouTubers. Yes, people like me. We smelled blood in the water. Suddenly, every headline was 10 things you didn't know about Squash's case, or why this plea deal changes everything. The machine keeps feeding because controversy is currency. And while we're out here making jokes and pointing fingers, let's not pretend this isn't also someone's life unraveling in real time. Here's the kicker. The industry reaction tells you everything you need to know about how fragile fame really is. One day, you're the golden child, the next you're radioactive. And the speed of that shift, whew, faster than my auntie grabbing the last slice of sweet potato pie on Thanksgiving. So, yeah, Squash's plea deal was shocking, but the bigger scandal might just be how quickly the people who hyped him up vanished when it was time to stand beside him. The fan reactions. Now let's talk about the people who really keep this whole circus alive, the fans. Because when Squash's plea deal dropped, social media turned into the Wild West. It wasn't just a discussion, it was a full-on brawl in the comments section. On one side, you had the die-hard fans, the ones who treat Squash like he's family. They were already pulling out excuses like, well, you know the system is biased, or he's just protecting himself. Some even tried the classic, separate the art from the artist line, which, let's be real, always pops up when somebody's fave gets caught up in a scandal, like clockwork. Then there were the betrayed fans. And ooh, baby, they were loud. These were the folks who defended Squash through every rumor, every sketchy headline, only to now feel like they got played harder than a bootleg cassette tape. Their tweets read like breakup letters. I stood by you, and this is how you do me. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody mailed him a Dear John letter directly to the prison. And of course, because this is the internet, the memes came flying in. Oh, the memes. I'm talking Squash photoshopped into courtroom scenes, Squash behind bars holding up mixtapes, Squash dressed like he's on Law and Order, Special Clowns Unit. My personal favorite? Someone pasted his face onto a Monopoly card that said, "Go directly to jail, do not pass go, do not collect $200. The internet has no chill, and thank goodness for that, because sometimes the memes explain the story better than the news. But beyond the jokes, fan culture revealed something bigger. People were wrestling with the idea of accountability versus loyalty. Some fans couldn't let go. They doubled down, swearing the truth would come out eventually. Others? They cut ties instantly, like one second they had Squash posters on their wall, and the next those posters were in the recycling bin with last week's pizza boxes. And here's where it gets spicy. Some fans turned on other fans. Whole battles broke out between Team Forgive and Team Forget. Instagram Lives turned into therapy sessions. TikToks turned into think pieces. I even saw one girl make a full PowerPoint presentation about why Squash should be canceled, complete with transition slides and background music. That's dedication. You know what really stung for fans though? The feeling that Squash didn't just let the industry down, he let them down. When you build your brand on being for the people and real, and then you take a plea deal that suggests maybe you weren't so real after all, that's like finding out Santa Claus isn't real, but also that he owes back child support. Still, fans aren't monolithic. Some will stick around, hoping for a comeback story. Some will quietly move on to the next big artist. And some will hold this over his head forever, reminding him in every future comment section, "Remember that plea deal though?" The internet never forgets, and fans have the memory of an elephant mixed with the pettiness of your nosy cousin. At the end of the day, the fans' reaction wasn't just about Squash. It was about them. Their loyalty, their disappointment, their humor, their rage. They turned his fall into their content. And in 2025, maybe that's the truest sign of fame. Even when you mess up, your fans will still make you go viral. So, that's the story. Why Squash took the plea deal, and why it's bad for him, his career, and his fans. What do you think? Was it smart survival or a total misstep? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more celebrity history and news updates. Ooh.